Hey, board. I am having one of those mornings. It's one of those days. However, at least... Oh, no, it's not all set up, right? The title's wrong.
We made our mistake. Now we can move on.
Furi. I'll change that. I would actually like to step away for a couple minutes to make myself a coffee and a breakfast, because I just woke up and I just poured cold water into my coffee.
It's true. He was telling me all about it in the pre-show.
It's a very unfortunate.
Terrible tragedy.
Very unfortunate. That camera looks pretty good without the lighting on in this room. It's not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah, you got a pretty sweet little setup there.
Almost like I've been doing this for 2 years or something.
Yeah, something like that.
It definitely shows. Quality improves over time.
Yeah,
Most assuredly.
especially when you're putting effort into it. That really helps.
Well, thank you. That means you actually noticed I put effort in. 'Cause I do. I do a lot of work for this shit.
I mean, hell, I made you play Furi. No. It was Raven who made you play Furi.
It was Raven who made me play Furi, and I enjoyed that one.
It was it's a heck of a game.
My only major complaint is the difficulty pacing.
Yeah. Paddle Guy is kind of a difficulty wall.
Yeah. Whereas the rest of the game just didn't prepare you for that.
No.
It's like, hey, we're kind of casual and kind of fun, and as long as you can push buttons in a reasonable amount of time, it's gonna be a fun game. And then it's like, master me.
Some people like that. Some people do not. I was on the side that liked that.
I like it when I'm ready for it.
Yeah, it's more than a little bit of a spike. It's just kind of whoop.
It's like half or at the very end of their game, they decided, you know what? Let's just make this game hard. And it was like a last minute decision.
Really hard from about halfway on.
That's not even halfway. It's more than halfway.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's only 3 bosses after that?
There's 2 more after him.
Well, and the secret one. Did you do the secret one?
I'm counting the secret one as 2 more after him.
No.
3 more including him at the end. Yeah. And that's a secret one. So technically, only 1 more mandatory boss after. Make a very simple and easy game, and then you must be doing no-hit runs on a 10-minute long boss fight. Solgren style.
Solgren is the developer of the I Want to Be the Boshi and I Want to Be the Guy games. Very difficult.
Yes.
Very simple. Very difficult.
Yeah, they're not made to be challenging games. They're just made to be hard. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Challenging is like, whoa, I got to make the right moves at the right times, and, you know, my health is getting low, and I can only take so many hits. That game is just, you're running along, and something in the background that normally doesn't interact with you just kills you when you touch it.
Or your cursor.
Yeah, stupid things like that. Yeah, that's not challenging. That's just being a dick. Just wait until the boss fights. Like the Ryu fight.
Ryu fight isn't even that bad compared to like Sonic. Sonic is bullshit.
Yeah, I don't even want to play those games. That doesn't interest me. That is not why I play games at all. However, tight technical timings, that I do like. With
and
nice
Furi has lots of those.
With nice telegraphs and lead ups, so you know what you're supposed to be doing. Then just, can you do it properly? That's fun. That's Dark Souls. It's always telegraphed.
Yep.
It's actually not that hard.
Sometimes those telegraphs are hard to see. Sometimes they're difficult to figure out, but it's always there. There's always a sign.
The hardest ones are the most simple, straightforward ones. Always. That's there was a boss in Terra like that too. Reminds me of a Dark Souls boss all the time. He had two different attacks. Like the tank could right click to block, just like in New World. Right click, block, all damage gets blocked. And he had two attacks that would wind up the same way, but in one of them, his eyes would glow red a little bit. If his eyes glue red, you get the fuck out, because you can't block that shit. You're gonna die. If his eyes didn't glow red, you can block and you're fine, and you can sit there and build threat. But he only has, like, you know, a second lead up on the attack. It's like, blink, and if you're not already getting the fuck out of there, too bad.
Yeah, you gotta see that flash or you're gonna die.
And he wasn't some, like, little humanoid guy. He was, like, a big, he kind of looked like an Anubis, but he was, like, 50 feet tall.
So like, it's big eyes. You should be able to see the cue.
Yeah, but you're the tank, so you're kind of staring at his knees a lot.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You had to zoom out and look up. Like, I gotta get out of here. Fuck this guy. Yeah, he was a fun fight. I liked that fight. He was so fun that we did him about 500 times before we decided we never want to do that fight again. Ever.
Seems reasonable.
Hey, Aspect.
Hello. Good to see you.
All right. We should actually start with not Yakuza. Furi. There we go. We're on Furi now. Game glitched
game
and half
glitched,
the
you
war
can't get
party
in.
can't get in. That sounds like you guys are losing that faction, which means when we're done this, it should be nice and even and I'll be able to change factions. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Oh, that war's tomorrow. That's unfortunate. This is you taking another one? Anyway, they're all on the most powerful faction, and I'm on a different faction, and I can't go to their faction to play with them because they have the most stuff, and you can't transfer faction to the most powerful faction.
That's an interesting way of balancing that.
I like it.
Yeah, I think I do too. Like, I can see the frustration. I can feel the frustration. I can see where that would be. But I think from like a game design perspective, that's not actually a bad choice at all.
Honestly, it didn't frustrate me. At all. When it happened, just because I was like, I understand this. Because you know what would happen if they would allow transferring to the most powerful faction.
Everybody would just go there and it would snowball forever.
Still winning at the moment, but they have more people, so we'll likely lose in the end. You're stuck at a loading screen. So rip. Rip indeed. Can't wait to get my warrior in there. I'm going to be all tanky tank. Just block the door and block. You can't get through. Pseudo healing me from behind. Eventually we get rage in there, blowing people up. Yeah.
Unlikely.
I know.
Unless you come to me and say, this is the best MMO I've ever played. This is the best chance you're ever going to have of enjoying an MMO. Then I'm probably not going to play the game.
It's a pretty simple build system, but it's fun. You don't need complex moves to do good combat.
No. I mean, Dark Souls is incredibly simple. There's basically only 3 buttons in combat.
Yep. Nope. Threats, okay. Okay. We'll see how it goes. The wars are cool. The big PvPs are cool. That's where I'm at right now. Hopefully that's well done. Because when you get massive groups and model collision combined together, it can get kind of hectic.
It's got to be some strong servers, man.
Oh, the servers have already had a little bit of struggling. Absolutely. I don't know if you've been watching, but there have been signs. Having run game servers before, we know the signs that servers start giving off when they start struggling. So when those things started happening in the game, we're like, ooh, you know what that means.
There's about to be some desync.
Oh no, that's lots of desync is typically the sign. Not there's about to be some desync. It's wow, this is bad. Like certain zones, you don't bother harvesting because everything's been harvested. It just hasn't despawned, so it's not harvested on client side, but harvested on server side. So every time you run up and try to harvest it, you just can't interact with it. It just kind of goes beep 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 beep, like blinks as you try to do the use thing. It's like, oh no, there's nothing there, and the server's or your client's going, I want to harvest this, and the server's going, there's nothing there, and then your client's going, but I want to harvest this, and the server's going, but there's nothing there, and because you're just spamming the button, your client just keeps going, but I want to harvest this, and it doesn't go very far.
I mean, it's at least it's not trying to be Tarkov, where it's client authoritative.
Yeah. That game.
It has a lot of problems. There's an incredible game buried in there.
Too deep for me.
It really could be incredible. I'm still enjoying it, but it has a lot of problems.
Not least of which is the overabundant cheaters.
Yeah.
Which, as somebody who's just trying to, like, learn those games and get better at those games, the abundant cheaters just makes me go, nah.
I did get a pretty sweet headshot last night, though. It was a PMC that ran up on me when I was trying to find Sanitar and snipe him. And got a flick headshot. It was pretty sweet. And then I got head-eyed by a scav.
And that's the Tarkov experience.
Yep.
All right. So who in chat has actually played Furi? Has anybody here actually played it? I think GD has. Pretty sure Dapper played it. I don't know if anyone else did. Aspect? You have played Furi. Excellent. Probably not. Oh, okay. You just know of it. The way you were talking.
Probably not, but Kappa.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And that's fine. All right. World building. It's definitely not going to get a good because it's so short. There's not a lot of building being done, but there is actually some. It's not none.
Yeah, there isn't no world building. There is some world building, and what it does has, I would say, for the amount of work they put in, a reasonable amount of intrigue to it.
Yep.
But
it also very much knows what it is.
Yeah. I was just gonna say it's just kind of there to prop up the gameplay, and the gameplay is really the shining star of Furi.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But there is a world there, and there are rules to the world, and there is a design to the world, and there are characters in the world that you have to get through. There aren't a lot, but they do talk enough, and they do some setup, and they give you an idea of the way the world is, and it does build towards something. I'm good with giving it an okay.
Yeah, totally fine with an okay. I feel generally positive about it in context. Have a lot more to talk about with the characters, I think.
And while it's not a long game, so they don't have to try super hard to keep interest and intrigue up the whole time, the fact that they still pull it off deserves to be called out.
For sure. For the scope of the game, and this is one of the games that I love to talk about when talking about scoping, because they did such a good job with scoping this game. They did fairly well. Fairly well.
That sounds like a good okay. Characters. You wanted to go off on this. Let me do this.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the characters, because it's an interesting game. Because as I mentioned, it's very, very, very small scoped. They were very focused on what they were doing. They said, okay, what do we want to concentrate on? We want to concentrate on gameplay. We want this game to feel great to play. We want it to have really satisfying combat. Kind of screw everything else. But they actually did come up with some fairly interesting characters most of which have their own motivations throughout the game, some which are revealed along the course of the game, and some that are made sort of blatantly obvious from the first encounter with them, like Orman, as you heard us talking about earlier. He's one of the ones that very much sort of slaps you in the face with his intention, with his motivations. He's
And
very
his ore.
straightforward, and his ore a lot, repeatedly. And I don't know where I'm going with that. Now I'm just remembering all the times he smacked me in the face with an oar.
That's one of those fights that just makes people while playing the game go, fuck this game!
It made me go back and actually learn the parry system properly and how to use it to heal and how to do the perfect parries and how to build up your damage levels on your sword attacks, and like, I'm gonna do this with only the sword, screw the gun, I'm gonna reflect projectiles, blah blah blah. It's a tough fight, but the way that the characters are written, they're written with this sort of like almost uncanny valley character to them, where you're just kind of like, something's not right here. Something is off. But that suits the rest of the game's character so well that I think it actually enhances. And I would go so far to say that the characters, for the most part, for me, would be a good, despite the relatively small amount of writing and the relatively small amount of characters.
I think I'm okay with calling them a good because they're all so different, creative, like just completely unique. They stand out. There's no like, is this character or that character? Just by the silhouette, you know who that is.
Yeah.
They're very unique. And yeah, on this front, when it comes to complaints, I have no complaints about the characters. My complaints are more in the mechanics department.
Really? Interesting.
It's not the mechanical inputs and stuff that I have to complain about. It's more the player conditioning.
Yeah, that's fair. The one character I do actually have some complaints about is the longest lived character in the game.
From the beginning to the end?
Yeah. He's just kind of...
I loved that character. That was the main character that kept me wanting to go, what the hell is going on?
Really?
Yeah.
Because I found him just a little bit frustrating. And even after playing the game multiple times, that's the one character that I don't like. He never really hooked me. He never really got me interested in unraveling the mysteries. It was all the other characters that did. But I mean, something for everybody, right? Like everybody's going to appreciate different things. The protagonist needs Titus voice actor. Let's not go that far.
Hey, the Titus voice actor gets a raw deal. He was told to do a terrible fake laugh, and then everyone's like, that laugh sounds so fake and terrible.
Yeah, it's a special laugh.
It's supposed to be fake and terrible. He's forcing out a laugh at one of the most down moments in the game. It's depressing. They just did a funeral for a whole fucking village. Why would he have a happy laugh? Okay, there's my rant. Tired of people always pointing to that laugh. Like, the voice acting was so terrible in X. Listen to this. Fuck off.
There's a certain degree of like, yeah, it's supposed to be terrible. As Aspect says, Aspect would say they went against the grain with the character and world design, and instead of focusing on realism and trying to please people, they went for surrealism, and absolutely 100% agree with that, and I think they pulled it out really, really well.
I don't know about the trying to please everyone aspect. I'm not sure that many game developers are trying to, at least indie game developers are trying to please everyone. I think this one was very much, as most people do, trying to make their vision. Mostly because he can change his voice and substitute literally anyone in the film industry. I liked Titus. He did fine.
Yeah. A great character.
Good game. I like
Yeah.
that game.
Fantastic game.
Well,
I'm sad that the version that was available to rent at the video store when I was young and had a scratch in it, so I could never get past the introduction scene.
That is sad. That is sad. Did I buy it? I think I bought it. Sure I did. I must have. I'm not so sure they focused more on one exceptional element, the controls, and deliberately didn't try to please so many other venues in game design. That's just what we call scoping, right? Just putting their effort where it needs to be for the game type that they're going. Yeah, controls are definitely a good.
It is a masterpiece of scoping. Hello, Pseudo.
Hello, Pseudo and Fan.
There we go. There we go.
And it sounds like it sounds like you're talking through the fan.
Maybe. I think I was here for a bit. Is this better?
No.
No. It still sounds like sample rate mismatch.
All right. Give me a sec.
So characters, let's just give it a... Are we at a good or an okay?
I think it's worthy of a good, especially with how well they scoped what they were doing with the game. I think the characters are well written enough that it draws you through the rest of the game, even if you're not super into the overall storyline.
Unique, interesting, and inspire curiosity. Helps drive the player forward in a rather short boss rush game. Because really there's not much to keep you going other than, do you want to know what's happening? Do you like the gameplay?
Yep.
Super tired, enjoy your lurk. Storyline.
There isn't really much of one. Again, I think this is a casualty of scoping.
Yeah, it feels like there's an interesting story there, but I haven't found it yet. It's kind of what I want to put in the in the box.
Yeah,
and I'm with an okay on that myself.
Completely agree. I think what's there is perfectly serviceable. I feel like they had originally intended, I should say, originally intended to have more, give you some more answers, do a little bit more with the storyline. But the released product just doesn't have those answers in it.
At least it's a hero's journey. I think the Kappa is more correct than the hero's journey there.
Yeah.
Performance is good, isn't it? I don't know. Aspect, how did this run on your system?
I've never seen it on ours not run at a locked 60 FPS.
Never seen it at not locked 60 FPS. Runs okay and you have a shit system. Good. As long as you meet requirements, which are not insane, you should be okay to play this at a lock 60 FPS. Which is actually... Oh my god.
I was waiting for the source of that. Oh my god, and then just seeing the whole thing just go.
I'm gonna let you type this. I'll be right back with coffee.
Hello.
Hello. You no longer sound like you're speaking through a fan.
Nice. I've been watching a bit because I'm a bit salty and couldn't get into the war that I was all stoked on for the server first. And then turns out half our war party didn't get in, but their full war party did. So, yeah, that sucks. I honestly don't know what's worse, not getting in or getting in, but only having half my team. I feel like I kind of lucked out in that regard of like, at least I didn't get subjected to that.
Yeah, yeah, it's I mean, I believe it's the first time Lumberyard has seen production.
Yeah, I guess because Star Citizen isn't technically production, and the other game that was made was like Grand Touring Racing or something like that. So like, but it was in beta for a while. Like this game, and I know it was just a really weird issue. It really kind of sucks. Don't know what happened, but like, definitely not something that should happen when there's something as important on the line as like entire settlements. So yeah, that's pretty bad. That was didn't cost me anything, so I'm not too concerned. But the guild, they have to pay like a lot of money for this. So hopefully there's some sort of, I really highly doubt it, but hopefully there's something that the GMs can do, because it is kind of bullshit that, you know, you put all this time and resource into something and then the game's just like, we're just gonna cut your legs at the very end or at the very start and make it super impossible.
Good luck.
Yeah, I was so sad. I'm like, oh, I'm ready. And then what would happen is like it teleports you to like a fort that's outside the settlement to like prep. And I'm there. I'm like, all right, hey guys, I'm all good to go. And all of a sudden, it just teleported me back to the city I was in. I'm like, what? And I'm like, I guess I prep from here, and I go to like interact with like the trading post to buy some shit, and then just instantly closes. I'm like, uh-oh. oh no. I'm like, the UI isn't that great, but the UX isn't that bad. Like they would like, oh no. And then all of a sudden it just goes to loading screen again. And I'm like, what? And then I'm back in the same town. I'm like, what the fuck? And I move around. Another minute later, it goes back to loading screen. I'm like, oh no. Oh no. The state is broken. It wants me to be there, but it can't put me there. I'm like, well, maybe if I relog. And then I go to relog, and then I get character service data error. I'm like, oh. Oh. Oh no. And I'm in the Discord, and I'm like, sorry, chaps.
Game says no.
Game didn't want me to play. I'm one of the highest levels in the guild, but well, fuck me, I guess. I was the highest level in my war party, like my little squad, and the game's like, no, you don't get to go. You don't get to go help everybody.
This is how we're auto balancing.
Yeah, it sucks because like the people who got in, I'm like, how's it looking? They're like, oh, we took A, and then they're like, oh, turns out we only have half of the team, and they definitely do not, and they have level 40s, and we have a bunch of, our highest levels appear to have not gotten in. So sounds like it was a slaughter. So that's not good. But the upside is that since we're not taking territory, hopefully Deus can join us, and the next war we'll be able to do together and on stream.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Good old Furi.
Furi is a heck of a game.
It is. It's a really good case study and like really good use of scope and design and focus. Have a vision, keep on it, because there's a lot of opportunities where they could have added a lot of extra stuff when it could have helped, but most likely not.
So Deus, if you move your selection, I've got the text that you had originally typed in there in my clipboard.
All you then. You didn't want to lose it again?
No, I mean, it was showing on my client and not yours, so I just grabbed it.
Yeah.
While you were gone, I was just doing my rant.
Which is it? Oh, about not being able to get into the war?
Well, lots of people. Apparently, it's like 15v50 right now. Their team got in, no problem. The gods, the server gods decided who gets to take it, but
Sounds fair.
I don't know what's worse though. you know, getting in and not having your whole team, or just not getting in and not having to experience the slaughter. So,
I think I'd rather not get in than get
Yeah,
in and be
that's-
outnumbered 50-15. Like,
'cause,
you're
like,
not
no matter
having a
what-
good. You're not having a good time.
yeah, like no matter what, it's a waste of time. But like I get to do something else. I get to hop on and hang out with you guys, and they just get to get slaughtered for another. It should be over now, but slaughtered for 30 minutes.
That sounds rough.
Yeah, there's a lot of salt. There's a lot of salt. It kind of sucks though, because like as I was saying, it costs a lot of resources and money to start the conflict and
Yeah.
like to start the war, and then like the game just does that. Like I don't think they'll be able to do any. Like I don't think they'll refund or do anything about it, or I don't think GMs will care. But
I'm not sure they're
Yeah.
going to do anything for the guild about it, but I'm sure they're going to address the issue in the game to try to make sure it doesn't happen anymore.
yeah, I mean, if it happens again, then like no one's gonna declare war, because like what's the point if all you're gonna do is spend a shit ton of gold and have a chance of maybe getting your army in there.
Yeah, no, that's ass.
Yeah, yeah, and like the party that I was in, because you split into groups, like I was the highest level, so I'm like, yeah, let's. That's the main reason why I was doing it, because like my guild and I've been working real hard on it, and it's like no, the level 18s get to fight the level 40s. It's like oh no. I was in the Discord for a bit, just like listening, and I'm like, this is rough. I'm salty. I'm gonna go do something else before I get like really salty.
Yeah. So let's talk about the animation in Fury real quick.
What's there, I honestly think is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I had no complaints. Everything moves well. Everything looks interesting. Bosses are animated uniquely.
I think a recurring theme, which is something that Reg already brought up, is that like it's scoped very well. And while there isn't like a lot of, or not very like always super flashy and complicated animations, they knew what they needed, and what they added were perfect.
Yeah, and they did a really good usage of like frame stop whenever you're hitting things, using frame stop in the animation to skip between your sword being up here and your sword being down here to give it a sense of power. Just really well done for the scope that they were going for. I would have liked to see a little bit more variety in the perfect parry animations. That would have been nice. But that's basically my only complaint with the animation.
And that's not really a complaint. It's just a like to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who wants to fill that out? Are we at a good then? Sounds like we're all thinking it's pretty good.
I would say so.
I'd say it's a major point of the game. It's really focused on the combat, and you need to have really tight and really well done animation for it. Even though there's like a higher ceiling for quality wise and extravagance, like that's not always needed for this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Who wants to put that in? I'm going to go grab my coffee that should actually have hot water in it this time.
That's an important part of making coffee.
Yeah.
I've learned the hard way. Don't drink the coffee when you pour the cold water in it. It's not a good time.
I mean, cold brew, right? That's how that works.
Don't do it. It's not good.
The animation is incredibly well scoped. The animations that made it into the game are very high quality, though it would have been nice to see some more variety. And maybe when Deus moves his selection, that will update for you guys.
No, it updated.
Oh, there it goes.
Nice. Thank you for doing that.
So, I don't think this is a controversial statement that I'm about to make. Style is very good.
Yes. I don't think we're gonna get any pushback on that. I think that's another. Like I said, I'm gonna be a bit of a broken record on this, but like one of my favorite things about Fury is it's just such a case
Perfectly
study
scoped game.
An indie game, or it's like small scope game, like focus and attention and just like I said, scope definement and refinement. Like you don't need super extravagant things. Like you could do a game like Fury, you know, with a super high budget and have a lot of stuff to it. But end of the day, it doesn't really need that, right? Like it's a fun concept, and you know, game is a really fun game mechanic. You don't really need to go, you know, super ham on everything else in that aspect, and you just need to find something that works. And for style, you know, they want something that is unique, you know, kind of matches what they're going on for the characters, and can kind of pull everything together. And I think it has like very, very well defined style, and they adhere to it and keep it very consistent.
Yeah, for sure. And that consistency is key, because even with the varied environments that you find yourself in, it's very clearly Fury.
I was going to bring that up if I didn't hear you say something about it. I assumed you had mentioned it earlier, but yeah, each area is not just the same, it's completely unique.
And yet, very clearly Fury.
Yeah, no matter what you look at, you can tell it's Fury and you know what level it is. just
I
like
mean, it
that.
helps that the levels are like this big.
Yeah. But they're still unique. Like if I just showed you a wall from each level, you could probably still tell. Still tell. They're very, very unique levels. And that goes a long way to the game, because it's just boss fight, boss arena, boss arena, boss arena, boss arena, boss arena. If they were all the same arena, man, that would get stale fast.
Yep.
It would
And all the boss arenas look so cool too.
Yeah, not just cool, but it really gives you that feeling of progressing through a series.
Yeah.
The style is consistent. Not really unique, but
I'd say it's pretty unique. It came out at a time when not many people were going hard on the sort of cyberpunk neon aesthetic. They did kick off quite a bit of it. I think it qualifies for unique.
consistent, unique,
Yeah, I think their use of
and
color.
identifiable.
I think their use of color and the way that they did their shading really helps define it. Because you can look at, like, you know, the Fury environments and the Fury characters, and you just know, like, hey, that's Fury. You know, even at like a more abstract level of, you know, without some context, it's still very, very well defined to that game.
Direct competitor around that time was Hyperlight Drifter. Yeah, I remember that one.
Very different game. I wouldn't say it's a direct competitor, but it's a heck of a game. And
They
big
came
props
out-
to the devs, because they came back after the game released and basically rewrote huge chunks of Game Maker to make the game actually run properly.
Nice. Oh, it's a Game Maker game.
Yeah.
Impressive. And Dank. Welcome, Dank. Fury was okay for a boss rush game. I thought it was good for its price, but I didn't find the combat itself altogether interesting, even if it was tight.
To each their own.
Yep.
I loved
It's-
it.
Yeah, I can definitely see it being, you know, different for some people, because it does kind of have a lot of, you know, it's a lot of movement, a lot of dodging, a lot of that kind of stuff, which, you know, if some people, if they're not used to a lot of like reflex times or a lot of stuff like that, they want to kind of go in and have that bit of power fantasy where you just kind of go in and dumpster things. It can, you know, not really be for them. So I can definitely see that.
Yeah, especially Orman.
It's combat.
Orman will ruin your day if you're looking for a power fantasy.
It reminded me very much, combat-wise, of Revengeance.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's what it
There's-
felt the most like while I was playing it. The way
It's
the
got a very
parry works, the way the timings work.
Yeah, I was going to say it's got a very similar timing feel and a very similar sort of skill requirement to be good at. It should not surprise anybody that I loved both of these games.
Random tidbit. Are there any? Is there any game that's like a co-op based boss rush yet? I don't know if I'm assuming that probably already exists, but I'm wondering. How that
Probably
would go.
exists somewhere, but it's probably not done well enough to care about.
Besides WoW and like MMOs.
I mean,
That's-
you can
that's
co-op
not a boss
Dark
rush.
Souls. You can
Sure
co-op
feels like it
Dark
sometimes.
Souls with the boss rush mod. That's a thing you can do.
Yeah, it says later WoW expansions. It sure feels just like a boss rush because there's the trash is trash. It was just Run to next boss, fight it. Run to next boss, fight it without much resistance.
Yeah, I do miss the days of trash actually having to be considered and thought of, and being able to wipe raids.
Yeah, I remember having to like you have to like have a pull path, you know,
Yep.
like which the order and stuff you do it in, and then you it literally got to the point where like you would pull all the trash to the entrance of the boss and just kill it there, and then just go in and kill the boss.
That's true trash.
Yeah, I was like, oh, there's
Rift-
people who thought that they thought trash was called trash because it's just trash. It's like no,
It's anything not a boss.
it's kind of true, but also not. It shouldn't be this.
Yeah, Rift had a couple trash pulls that were so brutal that they were honestly harder than some of the boss pulls.
Yeah, that gets interesting. But yeah, the point I want to make is like a slight tidbit, mostly just an ADD thought. Not saying it should have, but I'm just wondering how it would be if like a game like Furi had like 4-player co-op or something like that, where it's that same kind of idea, but you all kind of work together to take down a boss, and that's just how it goes in between.
It could work. I think 4 players might be pushing it for the network connection,
Yeah.
but it could work.
Even
It
like
could
a
work.
couch co-op kind of thing, like.
Coach co-op would
I'm-
make it more...
Yeah, I'm speaking just
feasible for
purely fantasy. I'm not saying that this game, like Fury, should have it at all. It's mostly just like as we talk about the style of boss rush and the combat and mechanics, it's kind of just a thought that came up that's like, you know, that might be kind of neat. I wonder how it would kind of play, or you know, if it would even make sense, and maybe it's something they try eventually.
Yeah,
I'd love to see that studio do more.
yeah.
I don't know if they've done anything else.
It wasn't hard, just thought its pacing was meh, and there were too many cutscenes. Yeah, it's basically just boss cutscene, boss cutscene, boss cutscene. That's definitely the game's structure. The world was cool
And
looking
if-
and stylish, but I found it uninteresting. And that's personal. That's fair. Not everybody's going to be interested in the setting. Boss fights had their moments, but you didn't really have a tough time till you fought the DLC dude who smacked you around.
That's
They've
fair.
got what looks like a Breath of the Wild like. The developer of Fury. I may have to go check that out.
Oh, you lost me when you said Breath of the Wild, like.
Except it's like a romance game, apparently.
You lost me
Interesting.
even more now. Sorry. Musical score in Fury?
Probably the best score I've ever heard outside of Bloodborne.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really good. It really, it's one of those things too where you know, even if people, even if it's stuff that's not really going to always make your playlist, it's just how it was designed to go with the bosses and how much of it amplifies that experience. It's another strong suit of the game.
Yeah, and I like that they went for a driving, melody-focused, sort of more interesting, more involved. Interesting is the wrong word to use, but definitely more involved soundtrack rather than the typical like ambient or silence to give impact to the boss approach, much like they did in Titan Souls.
I didn't play Titan Souls. Looked at it a lot.
It's solid. It's got really good controls. Recommend.
With songs by major artists in the genre. There we go. I remember Rage just losing his shit when I got to the Carpenter Brut level.
Yeah.
I love
So good.
Brett.
I don't think forcing you to walk built tension, nor did I care about... I didn't walk, I just pressed A and it walked for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was even commenting while I was playing the game at those points, where, like, man, this game really knows what it is.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's just preference, right? And not
Yeah.
every game's mechanic's going to be for everybody.
It is just a boss rush. It knows it's a boss rush. There's absolutely nothing more to it than the boss rush. Just press a button and let you get back to the boss rush.
Scoping.
Yep.
perfectly scoped. It's not a game for everybody, but it is a perfectly scoped game.
Voice acting, I remember being pretty good. All the bosses had unique voices. Nothing sounded out of place. Nothing seemed to not fit. Everything sounded like it was in the world.
I,
I'm sort of on the fence between a good and an okay.
I found some of the performances to be a little bit they're not bad or anything, but I mean, it's just like it is of course indie, right? Like there's or it's like smaller scope. I'm assuming smaller budget. I should actually check their budget before diving into that statement. But yeah, it's
I think we can all tell by playing the game the budget was pretty small.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to make sure before I make assumptions, and next thing you know, it was like some big budget thing. You're like, oh, well, that's strange. But yeah, there was some certain things where I don't know, but I'm also just coming off the Yakuza train, so like my
That's going from way up
Yeah.
here.
so like my
Back
my
down to
gauge
earth.
my gauge is a bit off because I've just been subjected to like I've been playing a bunch of like a dragon lately too, so I'm a little bit off, but there's I would not say it's bad in any means, but I don't know if the performances went all the way up to good for me. I don't know if the characters became like explicitly believable through those. But I think it was very well done for what it needed.
I don't think the voice acting is ever going to make these characters believable just because they're such absurd characters.
That's not always the case. Like there's a lot of weird characters that you can have, and even games like BioShock and stuff.
Something Majima.
Yeah. But it's mostly just like the personality that you can derive directly through. And unfortunately, it's a bit of writing, directing, and then also voice acting. That they all have to come together. Like you can have the best voice actor, but if the writing isn't up to par, or if the director doesn't give the voice actor the direction and the what they should be doing, then it may not be consistent with what the overall vision was. So it's nothing on each part of them. It's just kind of how these projects come out. I still think it's perfect for what it needs to be. I just don't know if it can jump up to a good and stand on the same platform or the same kind of category as some of the other games that have that good standing.
Yeah, completely agree. And that's sort of why I'm in between an okay and a good. Because, like you said, it's a masterpiece of scoping. They did what they needed to do and focused on what they needed to focus on. But at the same time, it's kind of like some of the performance kind of fall flat. Meh.
Yeah, I've only ever seen them voice act once, so I'm at that disadvantage. But I was super intrigued by what the hell was going on in the characters, kind of pulled in by that. That's probably why I liked the voice acting more, 'cause I was sucked in. I still don't know what the fuck was happening.
Yeah, I've beaten the game several times. I still have no idea what's happening. I just go back for the gameplay.
All I know is that he was in that prison for a goddamn reason.
Yeah, and he showed it on his way out. But I would say voice acting is a high okay. Call out that it's well scoped, but not incredible.
What's holding it back?
I found the delivery on most of the performances a little flat. Like Orguy, I think, is probably my favorite delivery of the lot.
I can see that. There definitely wasn't much. And yeah, I agree the narrator's voice was good, Dick. It helped. It was a good setup.
Yeah.
Nothing bad to say about it.
No, and that's fine. Like we gotta.
Yep.
So yeah. It's like okay does not mean bad
yeah.
in any regard. So it's like games at the very least should be targeting for okay in every category, and it's just one of those things where our words are kind of difficult to fully explain. But okay doesn't mean like okay. It just means like it meets the mark.
It means that was okay.
Standard. It meets the standard. This is it's so hard to stop saying the word good because
Yeah.
for us good is supposed to be it's kind of like it's exemplary. Like like good is supposed to be like, we have a standard. There's the bar to reach, and good is, you're pushing that bar. You're either trying new things, or you're taking things and just hitting a level of standard that's just beyond normal.
Yeah. Average is okay is average, yeah.
Yeah, and the word that I like to use for it is solid or serviceable. Like they're totally fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're not blowing us away.
Yeah, whereas the good is just like, we will play this game just for this. This by itself is enough to make us play this. It was so good, it's fucking good. Sound effects. Sound effects did good state relay information.
Yes, that is what I was going to say. It was very, very good at relaying state. Not super standout. Probably solid, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's definitely what it needs to be. But like sound effects can be one of those things where it's really, really difficult to implement very well to push it to that kind of next level. Because not only is it just like the quality of sound effects you need, but you're really restricted on just an engine level of implementation. Like you can have like the best, like if you look at Sekiro for an example, which I think has the best combat sounds in any game, it's not just good enough to have those high quality things in play at the same time, but you have to be able to support the positioning of that audio and the layering of everything else. And if you go for that mark and you don't quite hit it, it can be kind of disastrous and really make things kind of, weird and feel off right. So I think it's another example of scoping. They probably, I'd assume, wanted to go a bit further in this regard for their sound effects quality and the implementation, but it is something that is extremely difficult. And they hit, the safer scoped mark rather than trying to push those boundaries a bit and focusing, more on what they really wanted to push, which is, their combat and their boss design. I think that makes sense, and they probably made a good call.
Yeah, completely agree. I think sound effects is solidly okay. Like it's totally fine. It's totally serviceable. But they made the correct decision by not trying to reach higher and failing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where one of those kind of parts of the game where you feel like it should be super easy. It's like, hey, we'll just get assets, like sound assets, and we'll pull them in. But then you realize how much it's also it's a style with everything else. Visually, audio is also a style, and you have to keep your things consistent, and that gets incredibly hard depending on how you're sourcing your audio. Because if you have to engineer it yourself, well, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to engineer their own sounds before or master, any sort of mixing or any mixes. It's incredibly difficult. And then
you mean audio is hard?
And on top of that, just audio is hard for operating systems in general, especially Windows. But you also have to, speakers versus headphones versus, everything else. You're going to have surround, or you're not going to have everything. There's a lot of stuff that, Pandora's box opens up a bit, right? So it's not always 100% required. Still something that, would be nice to have an improvement in if they get, higher budget, more team. It'll something I look forward to. But I think for what they have, it was completely fine.
Yes.
So
the sound that the parry makes when you deflect an attack, the sound that the parry makes when you deflect a ball, the sound that it makes when you just block rather than parry. That's kind of what we're talking about for sound effects, and it's very, very much about state information relay to the player is the biggest thing in sound effects. That's the playable side of them.
Yeah. Let's throw an okay in there. Yeah, there we go. Let's talk about the AI, because there kind of isn't any.
Yeah, it's a real interesting topic in that regard.
Yeah, like we said, it's AI / enemy behavior is really what it should be called. Enemy behavior, but then people that jump in and read it don't understand the term properly. Most people know it as AI. It's not true AI. You don't get true AI in games. It's just enemy behavior, and we call it AI. because
The
everyone
true
else
AI
understands
would
it that
beat
way.
you too often.
Or just be like completely unusable. Well, that being said, too, there's a huge difference between games with a lot of NPCs for you to kind of slaughter in a game like a boss rush, because the enemy behavior or the AI is going to be not going to have as much depth in a game like this, because they have a lot of control of what the player can do, which means that they have a lot of use cases that they can put right into the behavior of the boss. And that's kind of how you're supposed to make bosses, is not have them kind of acting on their own free will too much. You're supposed to have them in a bit of patterns, and designed to give an experience. If you want a certain experience to be provided by this character, you need to have as much constraints as possible. And if you just allow it to start, if you have a super complex, huge behavior tree, which is kind of how typical, big AI or big complicated AIs in games work, you just have this huge decision tree that it breaks down from, various states, what it should be doing and how it's going to do things. And if you push it a bit further, you can have it adapt and learn from player input.
Which is then getting into more of the EA sports games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're the ones that really sort of pushing that behavior forward.
Yeah, and surprisingly, like Smash Bros. Amiibos apparently train when you fight them and adapt their playstyle, which is kind of wild. And those Amiibos are actually very hard. I don't know if anyone's ever fought a max level Amiibo, but they will kick your ass. But it's one of those things where it depends on the experience you want to get, right? And especially for a boss rush and the style this game has, where it is a bit more of that scripted kind of curated experience of, this is what it's going to do and this is what you have to do to defeat it.
Yeah.
So it's more of just, predefined behavior.
Which is really the better way to do it.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
Yeah. Because
it
it's all about player conditioning at that point, right? You want to be teaching the player what he's going to need to know for the future of the game.
Yeah. And in this game, I would say it's like very simple behavior trees. Almost everything is pattern based, and that's exactly what it needs to be.
Yep. I think I can't give it more than an okay, because they didn't do anything fancy or special or amazing. It's definitely not a bad, because it's exactly what it needs to be. It is right where it should be.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's there's not really much of AI in the game. It's more of just mechanic.
Yep.
So it's one of those hard things where it's like
I said, we think of it as enemy behavior. We have it listed as AI, but it's not actually AI. Well, it's AI so that other people understand what it is when they read it.
Those are still like kind of synonymous with each other. It's not even really enemy behavior. Like I said, it's just a predefined mechanic. Like
that's still the enemy's behavior.
But my point is that it's a predefined mechanic. Like it's the same as, if you had to do like a jump puzzle, it's predefined in the sense of how you were going to complete it. The enemy is predefined in how you're going to, defeat it. It just is a little bit different because it's moving. But in regards to when we say traditional AI, where it's, acting on its own accord, moving around and making its own kind of decisions, that's not really there. It's more of like, the way it's defined, when we get to like a design standpoint, the difference between an enemy and a hazard is that, the enemy moves for the most part, but you can still have moving hazards. And then where the real difference comes between is the decisions it can make. And depending on this, it's a lot of kind of just moving hazards rather than, a real kind of enemy, which is kind of weird because, it is a boss and it feels like an enemy, but it's like one of those things where it's, it is just a pattern, and that's kind of how boss rushes are supposed to work, at least to have them be this way. You could have a really organic thing, but then it could be kind of not frustrating, but it's really hard to curate that experience to something you'd want, because then depending on how that AI was rolling, people are going to have wildly different experiences. But it's one of those things that it's kind of hard to gauge. It's like with things with like RNG, right? We're hard to say bad or good depending on, whether it really needed it or not when a game doesn't have it. I don't know if this game would have really benefited from having, an AI for the bosses for the most part, and have them act, a lot more organically. I think the way they do things, where it is kind of, more in that style of predefined experience, restraint. This is, the things you have to do to overcome it and beat it, except for, certain speed running strategies. If I ever speed run, I want that to be my nickname, is the speed rat. Speed running strategy. So it's, yeah. Just want to clarify when we say, okay, I want to make sure that it's not like the AI could have been better. It's just that, what they have there isn't really AI, but that is, perfectly fine and probably how it should be.
Yeah. And like you said, I would argue that this is precisely the sort of behavior that you would want in a boss rush like this. Your predefined patterns so that you know how to deal with it.
Yeah, it's like the weird way to think about it is just if you're doing like a platformer game and there's moving platforms and they kind of respond to how you move. It's not so much like it really has AI. It just has a bit of response to or predefined responses to what's going on, and you figure out the patterns. You figure out what you need to get through it, and that's kind of how you get through it. But it's kind of neat to go something like that to apply it to an actual enemy trying to kick your ass. But it allows for really really proper boss design and proper curation of what that experience should be.
Cool. Write it up.
I don't have it open.
I'm on it.
Thank you.
The enemies in this game are designed more as hazards than a traditional enemy and use predefined patterns in combat. This is generally how you want a boss rush game to be designed. Cool.
Streamlab's super broken.
Rip. PC Gaming Wiki. Furi. So let's talk a little bit about accessibility then.
Yeah. Hey Val, how you doing?
Welcome.
Did you play Fury? I think it's on PS4, isn't it?
I believe it's on all the consoles, yeah? Definitely has PS4 controller support.
Mind me. Just breaking everything. Yep. That's what I do.
So it's got controller types, but not full controller rebinding. So you can have different control schemes, but not necessarily assign what it is that you want each individual button to do. It does have keyboard rebinding, because of course it does. There's not any sort of colorblind options in the game. I don't know how impactful it would be. I can see the sniper stage being a problem for people who are color deficient. Everything would sort of blend together. But there are no options around that.
Yeah. I don't
I
know.
would say not great, honestly.
I mean,
at
there's
least
not even
it
really
has-
options, right?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, if you can play it, you can play it. If not, too bad.
It does have different control schemes for different controllers, but like it's
Yeah.
not the worst, but it's not good.
Yeah,
Like
it
Val
should-
says, lots of pinks, greens, and blues in the projectile types.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
The controller rebinding is a big one, especially since it is on the Unity engine, I believe, and they do have support for the ability to add controller rebindings, or they already have that infrastructure kind of in place.
Yeah.
So it's something that should be there, and of course we talk about scope and perfect scope, but unfortunately I think it's something where accessibility needs to be something that's more important in people's scope.
I big
it's-
agree. Big agree.
I know it's a lot of work, but And it's something that I think, and so I'm going to keep preaching this, and eventually I should get off my ass and do something about it. But I really wish there was standardization in it, or like, some sort of, we can get to a point where at least we have like a default target for people to hit that, has a list of requirements where at least people can say, hey, the game has this, this, and this, and make our job a lot easier when we review accessibility, because we can just compare it to the list of
Standard.
Of what it has and what it doesn't have. Because I think it's hard for some people to, especially when maybe the developers don't have any of the need for some certain accessibility options. Then it's hard for them to be aware of the fact that it's missing, and also just the implementation. I know without, because to add colorblind mode, that does take quite a bit of research and a bit of knowledge and a bit of expertise. You can't just change a bunch of colors and be like, this should be good. It does, of course, take time and budget, but I really wish that there was a better way of doing it, rather than just hoping that they have the time and the room to add it.
Yeah, the big thing with the standard is it removes a lot of cost to doing it. It really does. Because there's no more research and all that phase of what do we have to do to our game, and how much are we going to do, and what can we afford. It's just, this is a lump cost now, and we already know exactly what needs to be done, and we've probably already done it before because it gets done to all the games, so you've already got the code bases there to use.
Yeah, and if you're lucky, it'll get built in at the engine level.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's the part I would love, because I said they're using Unity, and I would love it if Unity could just have an accessibility tool set built right in, with the standards of this is how these are used, this is the result of this. I think that's the point we need to get, and so it's not always just on the developer. And that was something we talked about previously with consoles as well. Is we would love to have for the consoles a console level operating system, or operating system level of accessibility options for things, and not just put it on the game developers, because unfortunately they don't always have the time and the budget. But if it's standard to what the platform they're using, then they're going to use it.
Like example that we were talking about, the inverted look, for having both
there's
looks inverted.
No reason that can't be an operating system level toggle.
Yeah.
No reason.
It's super easy to do. It's like super easy to do. It's one line of code. Not even. It's an adjustment to a line of code.
They can just put it right in the hardware. Like, it can just be right in the hardware. It's just signal is flipped.
So are we at an okay or a bad on Furi? I think we're at a bad.
I'm pretty tempted to say bad. Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, controller rebind, especially at this time, is
rebind
is really needed, and it doesn't seem like it's
colorblind options with a reliance on color.
And it may not seem like
just play this game, then you're just out of luck.
And it may not seem like a big like a huge thing for a lot of people for the controller rebind, but the main thing for it is that there's a lot of people who will have custom built controllers, or custom made things that aren't official, but they are built off of an Xbox controller. You disassemble it and you reassemble it for it to meet their needs. But with that case, things need to be rebind. All of a sudden your RB button isn't really going to be the same as RB. Certain things need to change, and if you can't change how those work, it can be incredibly limiting. And from a code standpoint, I've worked with Unity before. You can map controller input to actions and expose that, and be able to remap those things typically. It of course can be a bit of work, because it's not a full module. You do have to write the kind of pattern yourself, but it's definitely something that's a lot easier to do when you have an engine with that kind of input mapping, rather than if you're building it from yourself.
Yeah, some devs react that way, Dank, but make sure you watch the Doom Eternal devs react video if you ever haven't seen that one, because when they see the players flying through the air, their reaction is, we should write something in the skybox so that they can see it when they do stuff like this.
And then one of them was like, I'm putting purple shit up there.
I think like, I don't know if it's most devs, but I can definitely see some devs, like at that point it kind of feels like you're you're putting constraints in place for an experience, and then the speedrunner's whole job is to exploit your and break through your constraints. So I can feel like when some people, it's like, man, I spent a year trying to get this to work, and then they just
Just
tear it
ripped
apart. They just completely tear it apart in like 5 minutes, and you're like, wow. Or just the bugs and stuff too can make it look a bit janky, like, because a lot of the times, you know, the devs are aware of these certain bugs, and they're just kind of like, well, if they don't do this, they hopefully won't find him, and then they're
get
gonna find
found.
him, and it's like, and then you can't patch it because you're gonna upset the community. The new Super Mario Bros. Or the new Super Mario, or
Yeah,
Mario 64 remake.
One of the things that I really like is how Yacht Club Games handled the Shovel Knight speedruns. They actually helped the speedrunners, and the speedrunning community sort of, you know, gave feedback and said, you know, this piece of behavior probably really isn't intended. You know, maybe we should fix this one. But then the guys at Yacht Club were just like, yeah, we'll leave the zips in. That's totally fine.
Yep. Man wakes up and ends humanity in 12 minutes. That was a good one, Dank. I remember that huge skip in Sekiro that you clip through the ground at the temple area and free fall all the way to the Three Monkeys fight. Yep.
Yep.
They
Or
fa-
the air swimming.
Yeah, the air swimming was a sad one. They found that hole to fall through, Val, by turning off textures and just looking at raw collision maps as they run around. Because most of the game isn't there, actually. Like, a lot of the game just disappears when you do that, including entire mountain faces. You jump through the mountain if you can get over there. And because Sekiro is such a high mobility game, they got over there.
Was not a problem. But I mean, that's the sacrifices you have to make in order to get a game to run well on limited hardware. Like the cheats that you have to do is, well, you know, a lot of these things don't actually have collision boxes. They're just textures.
Yeah, they're there to make you have the impression that you're in this world. But they can't actually make that world. Everything comes crashing down when you try to make everything in that world, because it's a lot of math for what's touching what. Yeah, good luck with your frames.
Do you guys feel that Furi deserves a little extra credit for considering the speedrunning community? They absolutely get kudos. Like, that's awesome.
They get brownie
But
points. Yeah, brownie points
they're
is
not
where I
gonna
put it at.
get a better mark because of it.
Now, if they had made my bank account a little bigger, we may be talking a little more than... No, that wouldn't happen. I have integrity.
So let's talk about the mechanical integrity of Furi.
Yeah, man. I love the mechanics, and if it was just the mechanics in a bubble, we'd all be good all day.
Yeah, I think this is going to spawn a bit of an argument because I think it's still a good, despite some flaws in the player conditioning and a difficulty mountain in the middle of the game.
Nope.
And no, I actually haven't played the DLC fights. I beat the game several times before the DLC even came out.
In my experience through it aspect, I kind of just breezed through the whole game. And the game was just kind of this nice, like, tight, casual experience where I had to learn some mechanics and fail a couple times. And then they were just like, nope, perfect it now. At the very end, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I get hit twice and I die. Oh, fun. Oh, 3 phases of this. Oh, okay. Great.
Deus had a hard time with Orgai. Orgai made me want to go back and replay the start of the game. It's
not
very abrupt. There's no conditioning. There's no teaching the player to get to that level beforehand.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a hard fight now. You have to deal with this.
it's not that it's a steep learning curve. If they had put Orgai at the beginning and been like, okay, you're going to have to be good. Like right out of the gate, they're like, you're going to have to get good. You're going to have to be tight. You're going to have perfect timing. You cannot afford to miss that one parry. Then fine. You know, the standards have been set. And we know what to expect moving forward.
Or put him at the end of the game. Just saying.
Well, if you're going to put him at the end of the game, at least do, like, you know, make me have to work my way up to it.
Yeah. Like, basically just take that boss and put it at the end.
Which boss?
The Orgai.
Well, you can't be just a low, flat glide all the way to that wall. Otherwise, that's what you're expecting.
You got better after you beat Orgai. That's why you breezed through the next bosses.
No, Orgai. There was only one more boss after Orgai. I mean, all the bosses before Orgai. Which is like the whole game. Love the game, hate the difficulty spike. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at with this. You're like that with XCOM. You sailed through the first few levels, then boom, Iron Man difficulty out of nowhere.
Yeah, like, I will agree that it has a problem with the pacing. I don't think that problem is enough to overcome how much good they did with the rest of the mechanical parts of the game to make it not a good.
It was enough that I didn't even want to continue playing it at that point. I finished it for stream. Problem with XCOM is... No, it's the problem with XCOM, we've talked about this before on Stream Val, is it uses real percentages where everyone else uses fantasy percentages that lull you into a false sense of security.
Yeah, it turns out 1 in 20 still happens quite often.
Which is 95%.
Yep.
Yeah. Difficulty is one of those hard ones because it's, you know, people's mileage will vary, and it's, you know, it's hard to tune that. The boss was a bit much, and another issue with, like, when you have, you know, boss rushes is that there's not a lot of in between where, you know, other games they use that kind of those trashes to train you on certain mechanics and train you and build those kind of skills, where in this one they're kind of just walls. And then that one was probably a bit too much, but it is just, you know, that one boss versus everything else that was there. And I think it's like one blemish on the record, but I think overall what the game is and the rushing, or like all the other mechanics in it is and how it was designed and the combat and all that stuff, I still feel like it kind of outweighs that.
Okay. If I'm outvoted, I'm outvoted.
And I think we should definitely call out the difficulty wall. That is definitely something that should be included because it is definitely real. But there's just so much good.
It's definitely a niche audience level difficulty. Yes. I'm no slouch. Like, it's not like I'm bad at games or anything. It was just unprepared for in the moment was my major problem. I wasn't in a mode of pay super focused attention and be ready for every single swing with ultra tight timing. I was in the mode of, you know, have some fun and figure out a couple parries and when and where I have to do things, and the whole game
and
just
then Orgai
shifted.
shows up and just beats you in the face repeatedly. Yeah, it's he's very much like Manus in a lot of ways.
I'm much more okay with Manus than him. Manus, it's still like the wombo combo just feels cheap, but it's still all the same mechanics you've been going throughout the game. You're used to getting one shot.
So is Furi though. It is literally all the same mechanics. The only thing he does differently is stagger his attacks.
Yeah, the the game format still changes at that. I know it's the same mechanics, but before it's like a run and gun, dodging balls, deflecting things around the screen.
I think what the main thing is it just doesn't communicate that it's no longer casual.
Yeah.
It feels like a very casual experience for a bit until you get to that part. And then it's like, no, you need to focus and try. And I think it's just like that abruptness that kind of happens there.
Yeah.
It's kind of what gets a bit jarring because you fall into a rhythm of things, right? And you get used to things. And that's why the difference between like when you play like Sekiro, which is, you know, you're running through getting to bosses, thankfully they have the in-betweens where they throw someone really tough at you that's going to kick your ass and be like, you got to learn this to get to the next part to fight this boss because that's what he's going to do too. But I think what happened here is it's the same kind of mechanics, but now you just had to get to a certain notch of tier with those mechanics to proceed. And I think just like as we were saying, that jump was just a bit too much from what was before to here to really, you know, communicate to the player that, hey, you actually need to refine this and be aware of this and actually like try to improve this before, you know, attempting this boss. But overall, like I said, it happens to that one boss. It is quite a jump, but it's not like they introduced a whole lot of new slew things. It's the stuff that you were already doing. It's just now a bit frustrating because you were expecting something and the game is providing you something different. But if you adhere to it and you beat it, you can get through it and apply that same thing to the rest of the game, and then still plow through it. You're now just aware of, hey, it's not going to be as easy as an experience as I thought.
After you beat Orgai, you can go back and demolish the other three, the rest of the bosses. Like
That's exactly what I did on my first playthrough. I
They-
went
they-
back
they-
and I
they
was like,
wouldn't even
I'm
be
doing
a-
this sword only.
they wouldn't even be that interesting anymore. You'd just be like, "Hi, I'm here to murder you."
Yep.
DLC bosses in Furi are kind of skippable. They almost felt like boss concepts they decided weren't good enough to put in the final product, but later were like, toss them in as DLC. And I'm honestly actually fine if they actually did that, because people loved the game and were demanding more, and they were like, well, I guess we've got this stuff. I guess we can let them have it for cheap.
Have some more.
And if you really want it, you can have it, I guess. Sure. They have Promenade mode as well, which is pretty easy compared to Fury mode. So if you just want to like see the story and stuff, that's fine. And that's great. Like I said, Orgai in a vacuum, I love the boss. I had fun with him by the end of it, once I got over the frustration of like, hey, you're not allowed to have fun anymore, focus and pay attention! Where I was just like, hey, I'm having fun! And then it just beat me over the face with my fun.
Yeah, and there's two ways to react to that. Like, it's very easy for either of them to happen just based on the kind of person you are. Like, it's totally reasonable that you felt a huge amount of frustration with that. My reaction was the opposite. It was like, because I'm not on stream, I'm not trying to entertain people. I'm sitting there going, oh, this is a pretty good video game. I'm leaning back and I'm playing the game, and then Orgai comes and he beats the shit out of me a couple of times, and I sit forward and I go, okay, motherfucker, it's time to die.
I've gotten salty a couple times on stream, but I've died a lot without getting salty on a lot of bosses.
Yeah, and I mean that's why I said it's totally reasonable, is because they don't prepare you for it at all. It's just a huge difficulty spike.
My example would be like, I love me a good Sekiro boss, but if I was playing like a Zelda and ran into a Sekiro boss, I'd probably not be very happy. That's not really what I signed up for.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you could compare it to Demon of Hatred as well. Like, that actually killed my Sekiro playthrough.
Yeah, I think Demon of Hatred is a good comparison, actually. That is a good example. One or two during Neo 2. I think 2 is the most. I also got salty during my fist kill of ONS. But I killed ONS with my fists, so, well, fist weapons. Still more damage than a fist, but not a significant amount of damage.
You got a little frustrated on Four Kings because they're hard,
Yeah,
low damage and no armor.
Well, Four Kings I always breezed through, so it's again just like expectations. You know,
Yeah,
you go in with an expectation, and then it's like, oh,
you have
shit.
to pay attention now.
This is not what I expected. Really catered to all different gamers and still tried to fit in a niche genre. Oh shit, it's 5:30. We're not even done Furi. Okay.
There's a lot to talk about with Furi. It's a good game.
So next week, do we just talk about Yakuza 5 for 2 hours?
Maybe.
we could.
There's definitely...
We could do... I mean, we could always do, like, a bit of New World impression and then Yakuza if we would Yakuza for a while and save, like, 20 minutes for first impressions on this.
I'll save up and purchase it,
Pretty
Dave. 95,000 points, and I'll do it. I'm gonna die.
Or better yet, get Pookie to do it. You want to see some masterclass Bloodborne? You get Pookie to play.
She recorded her BL4 no buffs, no hit kill of Ludwig.
That's fucking impressive.
You would like meeting Pookie and like knowing them for quite a while. You would never expect that. That's something where, like they would bring up, oh hey, I've done this, and you'd just be like, what?
That's insane. But I believe you because you wouldn't lie about this.
Yeah, it's insane. It's like, wow, it's super impressive. I was like, every time I think about it, comes up, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. You would not expect that.
Okay, so legitimately, the first time she played it, I looked up at the TV, and she had only been playing video games for a year. I started her on easy JRPGs. She was not confident in her abilities. I look up at the screen, and she's in the character creator for Bloodborne. And I kind of chuckled, and I said, you're probably going to spend longer in the character creator than you will playing the game. And I ate those words.
Now she's got, what, like 3,000 hours in Bloodborne? Like,
not quite that much, but yeah, probably game. at least 1,000 now, I'd say. And she's done BL4, and she's done BL4 no buff, no hit, Maria, and Ludwig, and...
Has she done Orphan yet?
And, no, she didn't do Living Failures. She went past them. She's working on Orphan right now.
She's really good at that game.
Yeah. So anybody can be good at games. It's just a matter of time with controller in hand. But I knew Pookie was going to be good because Pookie's really smart. And
yeah, it's a big thing too, is time and also just being able to recognize your mistakes, which games like Bloodborne are really good for because they force you to do that. It's the only way to progress.
Otherwise, you're not getting any farther.
I don't mean to brag, but she did have a pretty good coach on hand too.
Yeah.
That does help.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like a lot of games you can get kind of lucky and get through, and Souls games and Bloodborne are games that you can't really just get lucky. You can't find... There are exploits, but they're not...
You can definitely just get lucky. But it
won't be
a lot less common.
Yeah, you won't get consistency out of getting lucky.
Yeah, you can't get, like, cheesy is what I mean to say. Like,
you're never going to get...
And I've tried.
You're never going to get a no-hit BL4 run with luck.
No.
At that point, you just know everything that enemy is going to do as they start to do it. And what you need to do. You do need to play Bloodborne.
Do need to play Bloodborne.
I consider it the best game ever made, Aspect.
What he said.
I got fucked in no-hit and gave up when I couldn't last and cause much, and I'm too stubborn to save state scum. I will 100% be save state scumming in a BL4. I am not farming up beast blood pellets and papers for every attempt. That is not
you're from Edinburgh.
Happening.
Very cool.
When I look at it, it reminds me of my home city. Nice. You know why Pookie ended up getting so good at the game? because when she first played it, she loved the setting and the scenery. She fell in love with Yharnam instantly and just went, I want to know everything about this. Her and I never argue except when we're talking about Bloodborne lore because we have a couple ideas that differ. And we're passionate about it, so it turns into a fucking argument.
Okay. So
Can you write the mechanics while I order some dinner real quick?
I was gonna say we have officially had our FromSoft tangent. This review, we should probably finish Fury. Okay. The fight mechanics are incredibly well designed. Combat is swift, fluid, and switches well between ranged and melee combat.
I don't argue with any of this.
There is a massive difficulty spike in the mid to late game that the player is not conditioned for and could cause some players dissatisfaction. That's going to be really tiny text.
That's how you know we had opinions.
Oh yeah, cause can be pretty painful. The one of the tricks to cause is knowing when to unlock, because you can get free backstabs out of a lot of his attacks, which is fun, especially because he's bugged. And if you have any of the Clawmark runes on, you get full healed on every visceral. And yes, Bloodborne with a stable frame rate would be amazing. I would love that. I would love a PS5 port. I would love a PC port. Please, please, Bluepoint. Bluepoint just got bought by Sony. Please.
Could you imagine a Bluepoint Bloodborne remaster? Or a remake?
It doesn't even need to be a remake. It just needs to be like tweak it and maybe some higher res textures and make it render at 1080p. That's all I want.
Ooh, I just realized that Elden Ring PS5 might have cool haptic features.
Yeah.
I look forward to that.
Do I get it on the PS5 or the PC?
Well, the haptics work on PC too. Like Metro Exodus, the PS5 controller on PC has that same haptics they supported.
Excellent. Yeah, I've noticed that using it with other games as well. It even increases the sensitivity of other games just due to the quality of its rumbler and its interpretation of the signals.
Yeah.
It's such a good controller. Oh my god. I love it.
I really want to try one, but I'm waiting for a reason to buy a PS5.
You can't just get the controller and plug it into your PC.
Yeah, but I'm not going to go spend $100 on a controller and not get the system for it. So I'm waiting for God of War, I guess.
It's coming. Are there any bugs in Fury that we need to call out? There's no bugs in casual playthrough that I saw.
I'm not aware of any.
I don't see any on the wiki. Nothing major, at least. I'm sure. Sometimes it's hard to see what's a bug and like what's a speed running exploit, but there's nothing that'll detriment your play.
Yeah.
Nothing like what just happened to me, where you go to freaking join your server first war and you can't get in, and DMing my guildmaster and he couldn't get in either. So like, that's bad. Imagine kicking
leader?
up and
I don't know.
kicking off and planning this whole thing, and the leader can't even get in. Man, I'm salty. I can't imagine how salty they are. Like, that's so bad. Oh, oh no.
Okay, done. I finished the rest of the review for you.
Yeah, that's accurate. There is no RNG, and the control, you can't poke holes in it. It's nigh perfect.
I would love Bloodborne and God of War to come out on PC. I'm sure you would. But you might have
I would
to
also
get a
love that.
You might have to get a PS5.
Yeah.
Because Sony knows that everyone wants Bloodborne to come out on the PS5 and the PC, and they know that if it comes out on the PS5, people will buy the PS5.
And if
Yeah,
it comes out on PC, they probably won't buy a PS5.
They will likely probably do.
Timed release.
That's what they've been doing
is
with a
what
lot
I
of the games
expect.
lately, where they release it on console and then it's a year later they release it on PC.
Yep.
It's also just better to focus your resources on the console release
Yeah.
and not have to.
I really like the timed release strategy, personally. I think it's a great way to do it.
I think it's
incentivizes
depending
your
on how it's
console.
used.
It lets you focus your resources and make sure the console release is good and everything's happy with that front. Take care of your main customers. And then after a while, when you've made the first initial bulk sale of it, then open it up to the PC market as well, because there's a whole bunch of people there that would also like to have it. That's a whole bunch more money. If they haven't bought a PS5 by now for it, they're probably not gonna. So you just get more money.
Yep. Aspect, we do not give number ratings. That's kind of the whole point of this system, because number ratings are misleading.
Yep. The number rating is going to be completely different for every person that plays it.
Yeah. Just a quick tidbit on the reason why we do reviews this way, or how reviews used to be, and it's something that kind of happened over the last couple years in the industry, is that for the longest time, and how things kind of were in like 80s and 90s, when you read game reviews, it was usually a specific reviewer that you're going through and not really an organization. And it was usually someone that you kind of identified with, or you knew what their tastes were because they had, they liked the same games that you did. So the point of the reviewer was, hey, this person that has same taste as me played this game and then gave it they liked it, a 90%. It's just an arbitrary number of, how much you liked it overall as an experience. Then, you were like, okay, if they liked it that much, then I'll probably like it about the same. And we've kind of just devolved now into just arbitrarily handing out these numbers without much standing to them. And unfortunately, also sometimes it just has to do with how big the marketing budget was to give to them. So we try to kind of avoid that. We try to break down each thing and kind of go over why we think things are the way they are. A lot of it is still very subjective. Like style is, of course, still very much going to be preference. What we think is good may not be what other people think is good, but we try to focus on, things like consistency and, overall cohesion of what they tried to go for, even if we don't personally like how, things look.
Yeah, at least it has to look like it fits. It's meant to be together, even if it's not appealing to our taste.
Yeah,
It looks right.
Yeah, and the big thing is mostly just trying to when you give things a number, because I don't think giving something a 9 out of 10 is inherently wrong. I just think it's done wrong in regards to corporations. I think that if you want to have personal opinions on overall of games, I think that could still be fine, and we could still give you an estimate of how much we liked it, as long as we're it's aware of. It's like when we say 90%, it's kind of like this is how much enjoyment I got, or how much I liked of the game. 80% of the game I enjoyed, 90% of the game I enjoyed, rather than all of a sudden we just have this classifying system that doesn't really go to anything, and it's just an arbitrary number, and all of a sudden everyone has wildly different experiences. There's lots of games that are 4 to 5s that I absolutely love, and there's lots of games that are 9s and 10s that I absolutely don't love.
Yep. Can't stand, would never play it. Until recently, when we started doing more of the exploration with other people about what games people like and dislike, I didn't even understand why people liked some of those games.
Like Skyrim. I think Skyrim's one of those mysteries for a lot of people, where it's liked by a lot of people. A lot of people are like, why? And I think it's the same thing for people who like those style of games. They look at games like Bloodborne and Sekiro, and they're kind of like, why?
I was going to say, this is maybe the only category where Elder Scrolls and FromSoft games go in the same bin.
But I just wanted to call out that pseudo successfully changed our minds
Yep.
on open world games, and I'm very appreciative of that. I still think it's a pile of garbage, technically.
Technically,
it's
yes.
not well written. It's not well made. It doesn't run well. The quality of the assets is not particularly high.
I've never been able to finish a single playthrough in any of their games without running into some major bug that prevents me from finishing my playthrough.
But on the other hand, it satisfies a niche that nobody else does. So of course there's a huge modding community around it. Of course there's a huge amount of people who really, really love these games because nobody else does it like that. And it very much fulfills their wants.
Yeah, turns out I was playing it wrong this whole time. You're not actually supposed to play the game. You're just supposed to run around and do random shit. Because when you try to do the actual quests, the game falls apart.
Yeah, it's one of those things I say. It's that, patio style sandbox. You make your own experiences from it, which it's also just not communicated in the game, because that's actually the best part about Skyrim, using as an example, is it wasn't even their intention. It's just that they kind of fell flat on so many things. That's the only way to really
Enjoy
play the game
Yeah.
is to make your own meta in it. And the tools that they have there are just enough that you can kind of do that, except for when they launched and corrupted my save.
It is.
But
it is literally the rose that grew out of the pile of horse shit.
yeah, it's like, if anyone else, it's one of those things too where it's like I'm trying to think of other world examples of it, but it's not something that you can necessarily plan for and create. They just kind of have to happen, these style of kind of patio games or these sandboxes, because it literally, you can't curate it. It needs to be just this weird, like, there are sandbox games, but even sandbox games are curated in a sense where you're just supposed to do whatever you want, and going into it you have that kind of predisposition to what you're going to get out of it. But this game, or Skyrim, was a bit different because you were expecting something else and it just wasn't there, but there was just a little bit of enough there that you kept going, or most people would keep going and then find what they kind of wanted to do and find what they found was fun. And well, next thing you know, they put hundreds of hours into it, and then the mining community gets in and says, hey, we can enhance this stuff further or fix all the things that we think are broken. And it's a really interesting case study because it definitely wasn't what they were going for. They wanted a more serious RPG story experience, and
That wasn't what they delivered.
it isn't. But it allowed for this just meta game to envelop, which is going to be really interesting to see what they do with the next one, because I have a bad feel, or because if they either identify that that's the case and then try to make the game like that, I feel like that little bit of curation is going to maybe falter the experiences people are expecting, or if they stay in the same path or try harder to limit how much freedom play there is, it's going to alienate existing people. So it's going to be interesting. I feel like it's going to be one of those things where it's going to launch and a lot of people are going to hate it.
Well, I honestly think they're doing exactly the right thing, which is never make a follow-up.
Yeah, they're going to. What is it called?
No, they're not. It's not going to release.
I mean, I don't know. Like what Morrowind took like 10 years, and then Oblivion took.
So what's your
like
thoughts on
7 or 8
Star
years.
Citizen? There's a whole bag of worms we can open up for 15 minutes to end the show. I've actually, so I'll start with some of it because I've actually watched some videos on some of the procedural gen tech they've been generating in order to make a whole explorable universe that you can go into rooms and whatnot, and it's actually pretty cool what they've been working on and what they've been building, and how far they've come is impressive, but don't expect a game anytime soon. Don't pay 10 grand for a ship. Don't do that. That's not a good idea.
My thoughts on it, and it's kind of a bit like the technical side of what the game is and what they're trying to achieve, I am very excited for. And I'm glad that it's existing and I'm glad that someone's trying to do it, because they have a lot of really cool tech on engine side, and they're working off Lumberyard, but they've made quite a bit of changes to it. But like watching the video of being in space and then in real time zooming down into a planet to the surface level, and the kind of asset loading that has to happen for that is insane. And the stuff they have is really cool. there just isn't much of a game right now. But I also have a lot of problems with it, kind of ethically, with the models that they've kind of set up, with a lot of the how they're kind of funding things, and how the Kickstarter stuff goes, and kind of what people are getting out of it when they put their money in, and there seems to be kind of a disconnect and a bit of like a bit of exploitation, a bit of overpromising, hyping things up so that you can get a lot of stuff out of these people, and then not always going to be that much follow up because you can't always deliver. And it's one of the things where like it's still going, and at least it gets to a playable state, but you kind of have an obligation to these people that have supported you along the way and have paid along the way, and I feel like they're not really getting treated the way they always should be.
Yeah, the problems I have with Star Citizen are not with the ambition, because there's a great deal of ambition there, and what they're doing with the technology is super cool. But at some point, you need to give people what they paid for.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm super excited for what they're doing. Not how they're doing it. But the tech is really cool. Basically what they're doing is they're using procedural generation off of a seed, and then that seed represents the area of the world, so that as you approach that world, they only need to store the seed, and then the seed can procedurally generate the area around it, and then they're just storing a bunch of seeds to make up the world and allow the clients to generate the world from seeds and interact that way.
Which is super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been pushing. They have a lot of bleeding edge tech, a lot of really cool stuff that's going. I just wish things would have been about a different way. It kind of gave me that same. It reminded me of kind of how No Man's Sky launched, and props on No Man's Sky to actually sticking around and making the game that they said they would,
and releasing a game.
Yeah, and because there was the problem where I think they overpromised and then vastly underdelivered, and it wasn't just overpromised, but there was just some like straight up lying. And I'm not saying that Star Citizen's been lying too much, but there comes a point where you have these grand goals that you have to really try to curb expectations at some point or communicate that. And I think a game that's been doing that pretty well so far is Valheim. They are early access. You're paying money to get in early. The game's not done. And they, start of the year, said, we have these 4 major updates we want to get out this year. They got one out, but the whole time they've been very transparent. They've been communicating. They saying, they were apologetic, saying, hey, we're sorry, but we're getting to this done. They put a release date and they committed to it eventually. There wasn't this endless kind of void back, but at least they're communicating that, and they're saying, hey, a bit more than we thought. We're pushing things back. This is how things are going to look. They're reordering certain updates now. And you at least, as you've purchased the thing, it still kind of sucks like, hey, you said you'd get all this content out and we kind of paid this money a bit. So, we would have this throughout the year. Of course, you can't always 100% expect that, but it's nice that they're at least communicating and not just saying, hey, you'll get it when you get it. Don't worry. Or, hey, or still lying about it, saying, no, it's coming. Don't worry. Or blaming like external factors.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that they were upfront about that. Like, Valheim really is how early access should be done. They're very communicative with their community, and when they do release something, it's exactly what they promised.
Yeah, and it's a big point is the game's done, in the sense of what the mechanics and what is the game, and
you can play it.
It's now just working on the extra content, which is how early access should be. Early access should not be, okay, well, we still got, a bunch of bugs and a bunch of stuff, but it's mostly there. Let's just, put it out there for what we'll call beta testing. And what they're really doing is, they've made lots of tweaks to how some of the game works and mechanics, and it really is becoming like a community-driven project, which is really nice. And also their price point for like $20, I think, was very more than reasonable. I hate seeing early access games that are like $90, and I'm like, oh.
Pay us more for half a product.
Yeah, and it's like, and then you don't get to, it's like if your game's not done, even though if you're selling and releasing it, it's done. Like that's just how it is. But if it's not the full product that you've promised, you shouldn't be charging the full price of things that don't exist yet. It's like you're selling a car and it's like, well, it's going to have these upgrades, and it's like, cool. Are they in the car? Like, well, not yet, but in a year we'll install them. It's like, well, I'll pay for those upgrades in a year when you install them. Kind of an idea.
That would be
unless
the
you're
same
Tesla. Unless you're Tesla, in which case you pay for every possible option on the car and they just don't unlock it for you.
You have to DLC, DLC car edition.
Oof. I wonder what happened to Valheim. Like, everyone was playing it for a month, then nobody was playing it. There's about a month's worth of content.
Yep. We played weekends only and beat the game.
We have
we
one
didn't get
boss
the final
left.
boss. Yeah, you have one boss, but
There's
it's-
one boss less to fight. We've done all of it though. Like it's
Yeah.
basically beaten. We're at a state now where if we progress any further, it screws up for people who want that Patia style of play, so we're not doing it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the way that Valheim works is there's just enough content for about a month or so for kind of focused in progression, and then it falls off and allows for the Patia style player. For like me, like I still play it a fair bit because what I enjoy doing is exploring, and there's a huge world to explore, and I just take my ships around and kind of collect stuff. And my friends who still play with me, they really enjoy the building and like massive projects, and we do it all without mods or without cheats. So we actually have to source all our material, and we get problems to solve, like, well, how do we get, the iron, which we can't teleport up this giant mountain when we need hundreds of it, and all this other kind of fun stuff. So that's kind of where Valheim sits. I think in future updates they'll probably add a bit more kind of end game content, but they still need to finish the start and middle game content to have an end game content.
And a big chunk of us stopping where we are is also Rage, and I don't want to burn ourselves out on it. There's still a lot more game coming.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I want nothing to ruin Valheim for me. I fucking love that game.
I think that's kind of how, like I said, when we say it's great early access, I think that's kind of how it should work too. Is like, you sign up for an early access game, you get the curated kind of current content experience, and then when you finished it, you're finished it. And then when the next updates come out and stuff, you get that new content, you get to experience it, and then it kind of goes through with that. Unfortunately, I think what happens with some games when they hit early access is, especially a game like Tarkov, which is early access, is that they just have such a huge player base, and there's just not enough content.
Tarkov is released, man.
Yeah.
It's released. It's been out for 3 years. It's released.
But the difference is that like the game that they're making is completely different from the beta that they've provided, and they're still trying to make content for people that are in the beta, because that's the system that this is the same approach to the system where there's a bit of content, you want to do the content, and then you wait for the next update, and that's there's a wipe, you start over fresh, you experience the new content, and that's kind of the model that gets followed with early access. But now what we're seeing is people with 5,000 hours being like, what do I do now? It's like, well, nothing. Like, there's not supposed to be an end game. And with Tarkov, even for people who've played it, like the raid system isn't really supposed to be there. It's just supposed to, like, their goal, the original goal, is one large map with everyone in it. They've just been doing chunks at a time because they'll connect later, and they're not done yet. And it doesn't make sense to have half a world finished and ready in there. But they're still working on this concept, and now they've kind of become too big. And I don't know if they'll ever be able to actually implement that mechanic. It'll be really interesting. It's probably gonna have to be like a whole separate game mode.
Well, it's probably going to have to be a whole separate game.
Yeah.
Honestly, like Tarkov, I feel is going to stay what it is now.
Yeah.
More content to it, more quests to it, hopefully some more PvP. But they're going to take what they learned with Escape from Tarkov and then actually make Russia 2028 or 2048 or whatever it is, and have that be their big open world.
They've kind of they kind of hamstring themselves to not releasing the game early, and like I said, they overpromised, and now they have this grand vision to deliver on, when what Tarkov is right now is fine to have been released. Like it is
Tarkov right now
content.
is the D2 of FPS.
Yeah, it's got enough content. Like you can I've dumped probably over like 1,000 hours over a few wipes into that game. But even just like on a single, like without a wipe, just a single content, there is enough in that game to get a full MMO experience out of it, or a multiplayer experience, or just a shooter experience. But they've dug themselves in this bit of a hole where they have to meet up to all this stuff that's promised, that's upcoming, and still have enough content for the players to do during the years it takes to get there. And I think they should have just released what it was, and then started focusing on the next game in the series, and rolling over the current tech they have and the current game they have, and then releasing one with a much larger scale.
Yeah, 100%. And like take their learnings that they've done on Unity for Tarkov in its current state and just use Unreal instead.
I wish. I was going to say, and just use a different engine instead, but yeah, you basically said what I was thinking.
They really need to crack down on cheaters in games like Tarkov, though. It's getting rampant enough that it's driving off potential players. That's just FPS games in general right now.
It's just games right now. It's really brutal. We're hitting a point where there's a lot more people have started playing games.
The tech's also reached a critical mass on the cheating side.
Yeah, it's going to be it might be an interesting topic to talk. I think we've talked about or I know Pesley's made some videos and stuff like that, but there's a lot of money to be made, and the moment there's money to be made, there's focus and dedication, and paid hacks have always been around, and I won't name any of their actual names or the company names, but because they're sketchy and I want to get people in trouble if they try to go to their websites, but it's always been a thing to be able to go and pay for hacks, like day zero exploits that aren't detected and cheat. There just hasn't really been too much of a lucrative point to it, and we're getting to the point now where gaming is, mainstream and a popular kind of focus. And if you're good at video games, it's a bit of a social status as well. So it's a lot more than how it was, 10 years and years ago, where it wasn't such a more community thing. So a lot of people feel a lot worse when they're not as good at video games and they start to kind of lean on cheats. And then with games like Tarkov, there's an actual opportunity to make money for people who cheat, in regards to either, getting them the best gear or selling stuff, selling in-game money, selling in-game items, or even just there's services you can do where you can pay someone to run you through. They're going to hack. They don't care if they get their account banned, but they're going to run you through and level up your character and get you stuff, and then give it to you, kind of an idea. And we can talk about why people cheat later, but it's one of those things where it's always going to kind of be a problem. There's only so much you can do. I mean, we've implemented these kernel level anti-cheat, measures and all this super invasive stuff.
And it doesn't do anything.
Someone just has a separate computer with a PCIe card that can read memory, and they just plug it into it, and now there's nothing you can really do. And it's a cat and mouse game that's always going to be there until we eventually get to a point where we have to unfortunately sign up with personal identification, and then when you get banned completely, which I don't like as a solution. I really wish there was something else, but unfortunately it's gonna just get worse and worse as more people get frustrated. More people are going to turn to cheats because they feel like everyone's cheating, and that they want to stay competitive, so they might as well cheat as well.
Yeah, there's really two ways to go about it. There's the everybody else is cheating, so I'm going to cheat too. Or there's what I did when I was playing Call of Duty 4, which is get really goddamn good at the game and play Hunt the Aimbot.
I think a problem now is that with certain engines, I won't name names, but they just weren't designed for this kind of style of games. And the way that
it's Unity.
The way that you can just exploit them now is brutal. There's always been aimbot, but aimbot and other wall hacks and stuff have always kind of been the way that those hacks work. And you're reading basically the memory that's on your machine, and you don't directly manipulate the game. I mean, it's the same as just having someone move your mouse. You just tell your computer to kind of do it for you, to aim for the head, read the memory, see where it is, point it at it. The problem now is a lot of these games have not great authorization, and we were talking about this with Tarkov before, which allows you to do things like, I'm going to send my own packets and the game engine is just going to allow me to do what I want, and then all of a sudden you have a dude that just teleports on top of your head and starts shooting you, as we saw one time in Tarkov. And fortunately he didn't get any of us, but it's stuff like that where it becomes like an architectural issue in games, and stuff where all of a sudden you log in and your inventory is gone because for some reason they had access to those packets. And it's stuff like that can be addressed. It'd be nice on Unreal, because I know Unreal has really good anti-cheat integration built into it and support for it, and their games do fairly well. It'll always be a problem. You can mitigate it. Aimbot will always be a thing. There's nothing you can do about it. Thankfully, you can kind of detect it, but we really need to cut down on some of the laziness around what is allowed to be authoritative on a client side, so we don't have issues where you can just kick a player. And you can also get to some dangerous things too, where you can find out connection information from a machine and any of that stuff, depending if there's any peer-to-peer. So it's a topic that really needs to be covered, and not something solved by just throwing more stuff in anti-cheat and not solving the problem where the game's just flawed at the start.
Yeah, we should quickly address what Spent said, and that's not a solution at all, Spent. That's just people's experience, and that's not accurate. How often people get killed by a hacker and think they got killed by a hacker compared to how often they're wrong is a pretty drastic number.
Yeah, it's I'm living proof of that. I've been banned from over a dozen clan servers for aimbotting and wall hacking. But no, I've just got like 20,000 hours in FPS games.
Well, there's
only
there's latency and desync as well, right? So on your screen, they could be behind the wall, but on their screen, they've peeked the wall and are already shooting you. So in your mind, they just shot you through the wall. So you go in and you downvote them, and it's or you're salty because that's like 99% of the community, and you just downvote them because they killed you. That's really all it would devolve into, and it's terrible, terrible solution. Not the way to do it.
It could be done with like social games, but a lot of these games there is no social aspect, right? Like that's kind of why a lot of people do it as well. This is the anonymity of doing it. You know, there's that disconnect, and you don't really like if you get caught, you just make another account, and you know it's not really a big deal. You know, there's no like I said, there's no social repercussions for it. So that's the nice thing about Valve's system is it's on your VAC account. It lists your bans. You get banned for all Valve games. So when you do get banned, you can't play all Valve games. You still get around it, of course, by just having a cheater account. But at least it's a little bit more enforced, right? People will still have, main accounts, and not everyone's going to want to have to do stuff. I don't know. I also don't like it. It just kind of sucks because like most of the solutions that are out there are going to affect the non-cheaters more than the cheaters, because the cheaters will always get around them, and it's just going to put more and more kind of blockades in front of people who just want to play the game normally. Like if we got to the point where you get DRM banned, which I don't want at all, because if you get a false report with, say, you're running in a VM and it detects something, and all of a sudden now the repercussions for it are terrible. It's a really complicated topic. But I'm hoping now that with the rise in multiplayer games that have happened in the last couple of years, that there's a lot more people on the kind of good end of things that kind of can hopefully come up with better solutions. But for now, it's just going to have to be something we deal with.
Yeah, well,
the big solution that I can think of is game streaming. Once internet in general gets better, because then at least you can't hook into memory. You can screen scan, but you can't hook into game memory.
Yeah.
For online multiplayer and always online multiplayer stuff, I think that might be the best way to do it. Once the tech catches up to that point. Yeah, Suda was actually the one who taught us about it. Yeah. This is the thing. All you can do is make it harder to cheat. You can never stop cheating. The harder you make it to cheat, the less people are able to cheat. The less people are able to cheat, the bigger the market for cheating becomes, the more money there is in it, the more organized the professional cheaters become to make money and sell that as a service to everybody who used to cheat but can no longer cheat by themselves anymore. So you haven't really reduced the number of cheaters so much as put money into the hands of scummy people willing to cheat for other people.
Which is a
not
huge
a great
problem
solution.
in all games.
Yeah, it's basically the same as prohibition. This is what it ends up being. It works out the same way. It just makes little cheating mafias. The poison is in the system. Just try to keep it from getting the heart and killing it all. It's personal accountability. Watch, as Ray just said, watch Pestley's video. As a quick summary for all the people who aren't going to watch it despite us saying it over and over again, call out your friends when you see them cheating. It's a community issue. Just be like, that's not cool. I won't play with you when you do that. Because it ruins it for everyone.
How would you cheat a streaming service? Screen scanning.
Yeah, which is how they actually do D2 bots already. They read the pixels on the screen and interpret the pixels, and then they issue mouse clicks onto the screen. Try catching that.
Especially when the game client is being run inside a VM that's been isolated from the rest of the system, but you can still scan that memory despite the fact that it's cordoned off. It's still physically part of the same system, so you can still scan it from the hypervisor, and there you go. You've got all the information you could ever want.
Yeah, they've taken it to such a new level in regards to memory access too. Like I was saying, because you can detect VMs, but now they have it where you have a PCIe card and a separate computer, and you just dump your memory into that. Like it connects through there, and you can't. I think there are some detection methods, but like it's a cat and mouse game, and like it's not on your machine. The hacks are not on your machine at all. There's nothing wrong with it. It's all done. It's just they just read the memory, right? Because it's there. It has to be on your machine. Your game needs to know the state to render, except for a web client where it's just rendering raw pixels. But even then, you can still get some information from it. But I don't know, complicated issue. Hopefully, we don't solve it the easy way, because there's an easy way.
There's a lot of really terrible ways to solve it.
Like you have to sign up with your SIN or some personal identification, which I don't think is good. I don't think we should ever.
And
do
then that just creates a black market for people who go, oh, I'm never going to play that game. Here you go. You can buy my info for $100.
Or stolen. It won't solve anything.
All it does is create illegal markets, because there is a demand that is not being supplied. There will always be a supply to a demand. Always. If it is not a legal supply, there will be an illegal supply to that demand. People will get what they want.
What would be kind of neat though is some sort of third-party system that you can like sign up with and integrate with, and you get a token, and you use this token for all your games, and so it's not like it's an identifier but not personally bound. And then if you get caught cheating, that token's revoked for, or it's not revoked, but it's labeled as such for all the games you're in. Like you can still play them, but then it shows up as such that, hey, known cheater, basically. You get kind of put on that list per se. And there's still ways around it, of course, of getting new tokens. It would just, depend on how those tokens are generated. But I think there has to be a little bit of social pressure, but also a little bit of, technical advancement to prevent it. But it really does come down to a social problem, and we're getting to the point where we're going to hit a point where cheating is going to be neat and cool, and it's like, oh, you're that hacker guy, you can do that, and like cheats are not hard to make. I'll post some videos later about how to how cheats are made, and my favorite thing about it is the guy makes cheats that don't work intentionally. It's in PUBG, and
I've seen a few different games that do that, and they're hilarious.
The cheats kill you, and then it records it and uploads it to his Google Drive, and he made a compilation of it. So one of them is when you try to revive your teammate, your gun will fire, so it just shoots and kills them. The other one is when you throw grenades, it cancels at the last second, so you drop it at your feet and it kills you. And like it's all open source, so if you're interested in how the cheats work, it's there. And if you really want to screw with people, you can go and fork it and make some changes, then upload it somewhere and get some Google ads and say, hey, free cheats, and screw with some people to deter them. But unfortunately, it's easy if you have a little bit of technical knowledge, or they're not too complicated to do. It's you can just hook right into the code and make the changes that you need to do.
Games run on the ragged edge, and they cheat phenomenally to be able to do what they do, so it's really hard to put layers of security and encryption and stuff like that in the commands, because you'd lose all your frames.
The really scary thing about that too is that games and a lot of DRMs are basically rootkits. And we've kind of just been really lucky.
If they get compromised, you're really screwed.
Yeah. We've kind of just been really lucky so far that nothing major has happened. But I can't remember what client it was lately. They put on a notice saying, please don't update, or please don't run the client. There's a vulnerability. Because what they do is there's software that remotely executes scripts on your machine. And they have access to a lot of stuff and a lot of driver level stuff. So if stuff gets compromised, it can be really bad. And it was never really a main focus because nothing really bad has happened yet. But I'm unfortunately thinking with the rise in kind of cybersecurity and cybercrime the last couple of years that it's probably going to become a problem pretty soon.
There's been a steady rise in cybersecurity since the beginning.
Yeah, well,
I've watched it. Like I remember hacking Windows 95 passwords and stuff like that, and let me tell you, it was not that complicated.
For the last 2 years, we've seen such a spike that it's kind of nuts. My day job, we work in like compliance and security, and so we're very aware of that field. And even just the brazen attempts that are done on us now compared to 2 years ago is nuts. Like a lot of stuff was kind of automated before, a lot of like automated pen testing people will do trying to find holes, but now it's a lot of targeted things. You have a lot of stuff where people are personally trying to exploit you. And there was that hack at EA not too long ago where someone got a cookie and then managed to get the IT people to reset two-factor. And you had all these things in place, but there's always holes, and they're just a lot more targeted than they were and a lot more brazen than what they were. And, you know, our competitors are having security breaches, and we're having people who are like emailing me, you know, personally trying to like fake as like people that are high. Like I get emails from my boss that are fake all the time, which is kind of wild.
Yep.
And just a lot of shit in the last 2 years that we've had to clamp down very hard, and it's very frustrating and annoying because like the amount of things I have to do to like get access to anything now is there. But you know, it's a good thing. It should be that way, and we'll probably have to get there for games soon because it's just how we're kind of progressing as a society. Is it?
Well, and that's something that I wanted to bring up. Like it's not so much a technology problem at its root. It's a societal problem. It's a social problem. If we weren't in such a cutthroat culture where there is very much the tip top that has all of the fun, basically, and everybody else is in a situation where they have to scrabble to make ends meet to just, you know, kind of get by rather than being comfortable and happy, maybe the situation would be different.
They'd be able to play games for fun instead of defining self-worth based on winning in a game.
Because they have no power anywhere else in their life. Like, it's a really big problem. I don't think it's rooted in the technology. I don't think it's rooted in any one thing. It is very much social.
100% technology cannot solve this issue. It's not a technology can solve it, technology will fix its spot, because as the technology improves, we're just going to see the cheat technology improve. It's just an arms race. It's never going to stop, and you're never going to stop them. You're as likely to stop hackers as you are to stop cheaters, and hacking will never stop, because there's always a hole. You can't plug them all, otherwise things don't work.
Yeah, if you have a system that's completely secure, you can't access the internet on it, or access the system, or, you know, look at it.
Even nowadays, there's a lot of systems that have no internet connection that are getting exploited, and it's like,
That's what I mean. Like you can't look at it because you can read the radiation off the processor and see what's being executed.
My two favorite spy/hacking devices that I've seen. I've seen an example where they were able to record or figure out what encryption codec was being used based on recording the processor sounds. Yeah. The sounds that the processor made told them what the processor was doing to the point where they were able to get the encryption codec. My other favorite one was with another high-powered remote microphone, and that is by pointing a microphone at a window from like across a road or like, you know, a block away kind of thing. If they can isolate the microphone down to that window, they can use the vibrations of the window to recreate the voices inside the room. Yeah. That's the kind of shit that we have on the getting information when you're not supposed to be able to get it tech. So if you really think that when we can do stuff like this, you're going to be able to stop cheaters from making money by selling cheats, I wish you luck. Because if there's money to be made, they're going to make it. This tech that I'm talking about aspect is many years old, and because I heard about it, it was already more years old than that. You know, that's probably 10 plus years ago that they were doing stuff like I'm talking about. Welcome back.
Windows apparently decided it was time to reboot.
Oh.
It'd be like that sometime. I hate it.
Yeah. Anyway, we've now gone late, which is cool, but we only did Furi, which is, yeah, that's fine. Next week, we'll be back to pen and paper and do some more work on that because we don't want to lose track or lose steam because we all like what we're doing there. And the week after, GlenCon and I had a discussion at one point, and I told him I would bring it up as a potential topic, and that is the developer, producer, directors, developer producers' responsibility towards the player.
That's a good topic.
Yeah.
That's gonna be an interesting one.
So we're all on board on that one?
Absolutely.
Okay. So next week will be pen and paper, then it'll be their responsibility towards the player. This all came up when I was talking about... Oh, I can't remember what I was talking about, but the example that came up after that was Super Mario 64 taking out the speedrun bug that everyone loves in the community.
To address what Spent asked, it's because it's not really something that just they can do. It's something that is just found through research, and then rumors happen, and then people will go through and try it and be like, "Yep, that's possible." So, it's not confirmed that it's fully used all the time, but it is something that people have confirmed to be, something that is possible.
Yeah, they're not saying they're doing it. It's just it's been proved that it can be done. Most of it's all R&D stuff. But it's really cool. And if you
responsible disclosure says you go to, like, if it's a flaw in a CPU, for instance, you go to the manufacturer for that CPU first and give them a chance to fix it before you go public and saying, yes, this is possible.
Yeah, okay. So it'll be pen and paper, then what is owed, and pen and paper, and then more game reviews. It'll be Yakuza 5 and probably Darkwood will be done, I'm sure, by then. 3 weeks. Probably Bloodborne
maybe.
will be done too. 3 weeks?
Darkwood can be quite long,
Okay.
depending on how deep you go into it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then Bloodborne. So that's our October lineup, which I think works out great. So for October here, we're going to be playing Darkwood and Bloodborne.
It's a good time.
Yeah. Lots of wonderful October-y, Halloween-y, horror-y goodness in all sorts of different perspectives. A bunch of pen and paper making. A bunch of... Actually, a really interesting topic. I think it's going to be a good discussion. I really hope people show up for that one in 2 weeks. But I really hope you show up every week, because it's always a good time here. Yeah. But, alas, food and then New World leveling, I think. Probably how that's going to play. Do you want to maybe do...
Tarkov I go.
Do you want to maybe play some Insurgency or something, Rage?
Yeah, sure. If you guys want to do some Insurgency, I'm always down. I love that game.
Do you want to start with some Insurgency and then go to New World, or are you just completely in New World?
I'm gonna look at how the queue's doing.
Okay.
But I'm down for Insurgency. I'm able to run both, so.
Yeah, just don't have to quit. There you go. Yeah. Sounds wonderful. So we'll be back later with all sorts of different games, because that's what you all expect now, right? Right. Okay. So, until then, I'm Deus.
I'm Rage.
And I'm Pseudo.
And may all your shots be headshots.